The twilight outside was a deepening shade of indigo, pressing against the window panes of a house that felt too large for one person. It was the third night of David's business trip, a routine, finalizing the merger, excursion to Chicago that had become the backdrop of my marriage. I had just finished a solitary dinner of grilled salmon and asparagus, the clink of my fork against the china the only punctuation in the quiet room. Before I unfold the rest of this night, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It really does help more than you know, and if you're drawn into stories like this, I want you here for every one of them. Also tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in a small town where the evenings fall slow and gentle, or in a city where the lights never quite go dark? I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the soapy water swirl down the drain, taking the remnants of the meal with it. The scent of lemon dish soap mingled with the lingering aroma of roasted garlic, a domestic perfume that usually comforted me. But tonight it felt stifling. David's absence used to carve a hollow ache in my chest. Now, if I was honest, brutally, dangerously honest, it felt like a reprieve. That realization sat heavy in my stomach, heavier than the meal I'd just eaten. But tonight wasn't for introspection. It was for appearances. My friend Claire was hosting a gala for her charity foundation, the kind of event where the champagne flows freely, and the conversation stays strictly on the surface of success and summer homes. I had RSVP'd weeks ago, back when I thought David would be on my arm, playing the part of the doting husband. Now I would go alone, armed with a polite smile and an excuse for his absence. I went upstairs to change. I chose a dress I hadn't worn in years, a deep sapphire silk that draped like water. David had bought it for me on our 10th anniversary, back when he still looked at me like I was a prize he had won. The fabric was cool against my skin as I stepped into it, the silk whispering as it settled. I reached back to pull the zipper up, but my fingers slipped. I tried again, twisting my arm at an awkward angle, but the metal teeth snagged halfway up my spine. I tugged gently, then harder, frustration bubbling up. It was stuck. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the silence, feeling ridiculous. A grown woman trapped in an expensive dress in an empty house. Except the house wasn't entirely empty. "Leo," I called out, my voice sounding thin in the hallway. A few seconds later, footsteps thudded on the stairs. Leo appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. He was David's son from his first marriage, 23 years old and home for the summer after finishing his degree. He was leaning against the doorframe, dressed in worn jeans and a gray t-shirt, looking every bit the effortless youth that David had long since outgrown. "Yeah?" he asked, pushing a hand through his dark hair. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, turning slightly so he could see my predicament. "This zipper is stuck. I can't reach it." He straightened up, his expression unreadable. "Turn around." I turned my back to him, gathering my hair over one shoulder. I heard him step into the room, his movements quiet. I could smell him, not cologne, but something distinctly him, like rain and old books. "Let me see," he murmured. I felt his fingers brush the bare skin of my back, light and cool. A shiver, completely involuntary, traced its way down my spine. I held my breath. "It's caught on the fabric," he said, his voice low. "Hold on." He worked at it patiently. His knuckles grazed my skin again, a sensation that felt amplified by the silence of the room. It wasn't intimate, not really. It was functional. And yet, the air in the room seemed to grow thinner, charged with a static electricity I hadn't felt in years. "There," he said. With a smooth, upward motion, he pulled the zipper to the top. The dress tightened around me, holding me in. "Thank you," I breathed. I turned around to face him. He was standing close, closer than he needed to be. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. He looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that David hadn't in a decade. His eyes were dark, serious, stripping away the stepmother label and seeing just the woman beneath the silk. "You look great, Elena," he said. The compliment was simple, but the tone was heavy. "Thanks, Leo," I managed to say, stepping back to break the tension. "Don't wait up." He nodded once, shoved his hands into his pockets, and walked out. I stood in the middle of the room, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The gala was a blur of crystal flutes and meaningless chatter. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I nodded at stories about golf handicaps and kitchen renovations. But my mind was back in that hallway. I kept replaying the sensation of his fingers on my back, the weight of his gaze. It was absurd. He was Leo. He was a kid. But he wasn't a kid. That was the terrifying truth. The next few days were a study in subtle shifts. Nothing overt happened. We still passed each other in the kitchen, still talked about the weather and the news. But the frequency changed. Leo started spending more time in the common areas. He'd bring his laptop to the dining table while I read in the living room. He'd offer to make coffee in the morning, pouring a cup for me exactly how I liked it. Black, 2 sugars, without asking. I found myself watching him when he wasn't looking. I noticed the way his forearms flexed when he lifted a heavy box, the way a small scar cut through his left eyebrow, the way his laugh started low in his chest before breaking free. These were details I had no business noticing. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the house felt particularly enclosed. I was in the library, trying to focus on a novel but failing miserably. The rain drummed a relentless beat against the windows. Leo walked in, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you could use a warm-up," he said, setting one down on the side table. "Thank you," I said, closing my book. He sat in the leather armchair opposite me. "What are you reading?" "Just some fiction. Escapism." "What do you need to escape from?" he asked. It wasn't a casual question. His eyes were locked on mine, intense and probing. I hesitated. The safe answer was nothing. The safe answer was just boredom. But the safe answers felt like lies in this room. "Loneliness, I suppose," I admitted softly. The truth hung in the air between us, raw and exposed. Leo didn't look away. "Dad's gone a lot. He has a demanding job." It was the script I had recited 1,000 times. "That's not an excuse for leaving you behind," Leo said. His voice had an edge to it, a defensiveness on my behalf that startled me. "We have a life together, Leo. It's complicated." "Is it?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're waiting for a train that's never coming." My breath caught. It was too accurate. Too perceptive. "Why are you saying this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because I see you, Elena," he said. "I see you trying to fill the silence. I see you wearing dresses for no one. I see you." The room spun slightly. This was the line. The invisible boundary that separated family from something else, something dangerous. And he had just stepped right up to it. "We shouldn't talk about this," I said, standing up abruptly. My hands were shaking. "Why not?" He stood too. "Because it's wrong, Leo. You know it is." He didn't move toward me, but his presence filled the space. Is it wrong to want someone to be happy? Is it wrong to notice when someone is beautiful and sad? I couldn't answer. I fled the room, muttering an excuse about a headache. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face was flushed, my eyes bright with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I recognized the look. It was the look of a woman who was waking up. The days turned into a week. David called once, a rushed conversation about flight delays and client dinners. I hung up feeling colder than before. Leo and I started a dangerous dance. We avoided being in the same room alone, yet we gravitated toward each other constantly. A lingering glance over the morning paper. A brush of arms in a narrow hallway that sent shockwaves through me. A shared joke that felt like a secret language. One evening, I was on the patio, watching the sunset bleed orange and purple across the sky. I held a glass of wine, savoring the cool breeze. The sliding door opened. Leo stepped out. He didn't say anything, just leaned against the railing next to me. We watched the sky darken in silence. "I'm leaving next week," he said suddenly. My heart dropped. "Back to school?" "No, I got a job offer in Seattle, across the country." That's wonderful, Leo," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "It's a great opportunity." "Is it?" He turned to face me. The dying light cast shadows across his face. "Because right now, the only thing I can think about is what I'm leaving behind." I griped my wine glass tighter. "You have your whole life ahead of you. You can't stay here." "I could," he said, softly, "if there was a reason." He reached out and covered my hand on the railing. His skin was warm, his grip firm. It was an anchor in the storm of my emotions. I knew I should pull away. I knew I should go inside and lock the door. But I didn't. I looked at our hands, then up at his face. His expression was open, vulnerable, asking a question I couldn't let him ask. "Leo, don't." "Why?" "Because you're young, and I'm married to your father." "Does he make you feel like this?" he asked, stepping closer. "Does he make your heart race?" "Stop." I pleaded, though I wasn't sure who I was begging, him or myself. "Tell me to stop because you don't feel it," he challenged. "Tell me I'm imagining the way you look at me. Tell me you don't feel the electricity when I'm in the room." I opened my mouth to deny it, to lie, to save us both. But the words died in my throat. I couldn't lie to him. Not right now. "I can't," I admitted, a tear slipping down my cheek. He reached up and wiped it away with his thumb. The tenderness of the gesture broke me. I leaned into his touch for a second, just a second, allowing myself the comfort I had been starving for. Then, the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway shattered the moment. We sprang apart. Headlights swept across the front of the house. David was home early. "Go," I whispered frantically to Leo. "Please." He looked at me, torn, frustration warring with resignation. "This isn't over, Elena." It has to be, I said. It has to be over before it starts. He turned and disappeared into the house. I stayed on the patio, composing myself, wiping my face, taking a long sip of wine to steady my nerves. When I walked inside, David was in the foyer, dropping his suitcase. He looked tired, distracted. "Hey," he said, pecking me on the cheek. "Flight got in early, traffic was a nightmare." "Welcome home," I said. The words tasted like ash. I looked up the stairs. Leo's door was closed. That night, lying in bed next to David, I felt more alone than I had when he was in Chicago. He fell asleep instantly, his breathing heavy and even. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows shifting in the moonlight. Nothing physical had happened. I hadn't kissed Leo. I hadn't slept with him. Technically, I was faithful. But as I replayed the moment on the patio, the heat of his hand, the raw longing in his voice, the way my soul had leaned toward him, I knew the truth. Fidelity isn't just about bodies. It's about where your heart lives when the lights go out. I had betrayed my husband. Not with an act, but with a wish. The next morning, Leo was gone. He left a note on the kitchen counter saying he had decided to head to Seattle early to get settled. He didn't say goodbye. David read the note over coffee. "Good for him," he said absently, scanning his emails. "Kid needs to start his life." "Yes," I said, staring into my mug. "He does." Life returned to its rhythm. The dinners, the parties, the silence. But everything was different now. The house felt haunted by the ghost of what almost happened. I moved through the rooms like a spectator in my own life. I still wear the sapphire dress sometimes. But now, when I reach back to zip it up, I don't call for help. I struggle with it alone until it's done. And every time I remember the cool touch of fingers on my spine and the dangerous, beautiful precipice of a moment where I almost let myself fall. Infidelity, I learned, isn't always a crash. Sometimes it's just the quiet realization that the person you are sleeping next to isn't the one you are dreaming of. And that secret is a burden heavier than any lie. Please subscribe to my channel.